returning to the diesel issue between America and Europe, isn't there also, besides taxation, this idea that basically the cracking systems for making fuel from crude are different in the two countries, in two areas? We're basically we're set up to take the gas out. They're set up to take the heavier stuff, the diesel out. And I understand it's very expensive to switch over. Mm-hmm. So I think that has to be mentioned besides just the taxation, I think.
Well, now you're getting into, the refined products arbitrage in the international market, and that gets really interesting because about 2 years ago, the Europeans were short diesel and long gasoline, and they were exporting gasoline to the U.S. Well, now, and we were exporting diesel back to the Europeans. Now the U.S. is a big diesel exporter. Most of I mentioned 2 million barrels a day. A lot of that's diesel that's coming out of the U.S. because American refiners are among the best at producing ultra-low sulfur diesel, which is in high demand. So, I don't know.
Of course, there's a scam going on with that too, right? Isn't there, with the shipping? There's some kind of, I don't want to get into it, 'cause I don't know the details. But anyhow, it's something to do with renaming the diesel that comes from America into Europe. There was something in the Times about 2 years ago.
You're on camera right now. Just
It's all called Fritz when it goes over there.
Well, where were the Euros getting, the way I understand it, they've had low sulfur fuel for a while. Diesel, where were they getting it from?
Well, some of it was coming from the U.S., that the American refiners were quicker to adopt or move to ultra-low sulfur diesel. They had to go from 500 ppm to less than 15. Mm-hmm. They, in fact, had to go down to, in some cases, 5 or 6 before they could put it into the pipeline, because once it got into the pipeline, they're picking up sulfur from just being in the pipe. So, but the move toward low sulfur diesel is happening worldwide now.
But following up on that a little bit for people who understand the petroleum industry better than I do, which is almost anybody, if the U.S. does in fact see a steady increase in light-duty diesel vehicles, assuming the taxation issues don't appreciably change, do we have the ability to fuel those vehicles? Because when gasoline prices spiked to $4 a gallon, diesel went to $5, and essentially the potential window for higher efficiency diesel vehicles slammed shut before it opened, to mix a metaphor.
It's a good question, and I'm not certain of the answer. I think that some of the, as I read it, some of that spike in diesel was due to that coming at the super high oil prices at the time when ultra-low sulfur was also in high demand, and refiners were having to run more crude through their refineries in order to get diesel, which was viewed as a premium product at that time. There was greater demand for diesel than there was for gasoline, particularly in Europe. And some of that was in 08, remember, and I've talked to oil traders in Houston, and they were saying, well, a lot of this was driven by the Chinese Olympics. Chinese were stockpiling diesel to make sure that the lights didn't go out, and they had enough diesel on hand. If the generators went down, they didn't want to be caught looking stupid, and they wanted to have enough diesel on hand to make sure that if they had to fire their recip Caterpillar electric generators, they were going to have enough. So, God, I mean, it's incredibly complicated. I mean, all the different factors in the global oil market, but it seems to me a fairly plausible explanation for why it spiked as high as it did.
In the context of that comment as well, I mean, there's a reasonable argument for, more significant policy mandate for a certain infiltration or penetration of diesel in the United States that would be somehow subsidized or supported by extra refineries as well. I mean, there's different ways you can skin this, but it's not going to. Given what all this that's just been said, I think there needs to be some more proactive work, perhaps, from the government side to push it in.
Yeah. Why not a tax incentive for diesel cars?
Sorry, what?
When's the last time the U.S. built a refinery?
It doesn't matter. I mean, the refineries are. It doesn't. It doesn't, because what's happening. I mean, that's a greenfield refinery. Well, now Marathon is building a greenfield refinery in Garyville, Louisiana, and they're getting there. I mean, it's costing them a fortune, and it looks like the worst business decision of all time. Valero just shut down their refinery in Delaware City, Delaware, because they were losing $1 million a day. They just sold it to some vulture investor for $200 million, and they were lucky to get it. They shut down their refinery in Aruba because oil demand in the U.S. is flat or declining. So, Bush, 5 years ago, I found the clip the other day, 5 years ago, Bush gets out there and says, well, we need to build refineries. We're going to build them on military bases. We need more refineries. the oil refiners today are shutting down for lack of demand. They're losing money. Refining is a terrible business. All the money in the oil business historically has always been made in the upstream. It's the guys who drill the wells and get the oil out of the ground. They make the money. The refiners, they go up, they go down. Every 2 years out of 20, they make a lot of money. The rest of the time, they suck hind tit. It's terrible. It's because it's a very capital-intensive, low-margin business.
Yeah, it's materials processing, not materials producing, right? And processors always get the short end of the stick. When you talk about supply chain and value chain, you're much better off. If you're a processor, you want to be vertically integrated to a supply, or else you're not going to make money.
And if you look at Kerry Graham Lieberman, the new bill that the Senate is looking at, they're planning to sock it to the refiners. They are. That is you look at it, and that is the tax plan that they have. They are going to slam it to the refiners.
So we're at the end of our time, and rather than trying to wrap up this entire day with a neat red bow around it, I'm going to make the panel do their work.
Uh-oh.
Yes, with the last question, which is, if President Obama were to walk in and sit down at the back of the room, which could happen because I know Jana has a lot of pull, absolutely, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to him?
I'd tell him to please listen to the engineers and the scientists a little bit more than the politicians that drive his train.
Read my book.
And then read your lips.
Yeah, you don't have to read it, you just have to buy it. No, I'd say, no, read it, Mr. President.
Yeah, I'd tell him to read the Roberts book.
You have to have an original idea, Jay.
I think if we both jump on the book, he'll read it. So.
I'll give you $20 later. Appreciate that.
No, I don't know. There's so many things I could, specific to what I talk about today, I would say, be careful about investing in energy storage. Be careful that there's a long-term exit strategy for the U.S. government. Don't make our automotive companies dependent on a technology that's never going to be cost sustainable. Be sure there's exit strategy.
All right, well, thank you all very much to our panel.
Thank you.